Hi, my name's Venitra. My parents once told me, "You're ungrateful. Get out and never come back." So I left. But what hurts more than being kicked out is realizing they'd been planning it long before they said a word. They transferred the house into my brother's name behind my back. They drained my account, used my name to cash out insurance, then asked me to save them when everything fell apart. What do you do when the people who raised you were never really rooting for you? Would you still call that family? Let me tell you what happened next. I'd been planning the anniversary party for 6 weeks. Between work and home, I carved out hours in my evenings, most of them long after everyone else in the house had gone to bed. I designed the invitations myself, printed the menus, arranged the catering, and even borrowed a projector from my coworker to put together a slideshow with old family photos. Every plate on the table, every napkin folded just right, I'd touched it. It mattered to me that my parents felt special. After all, 35 years together wasn't nothing. That afternoon, I arrived early at the community center we'd rented. I changed into a dress I hadn't worn in over a year. Simple, dark green, long sleeve safe. I knew better than to outshine my mother at her own event. She'd made comments before, little digs. Some girls dress like they're always trying to prove something. By 6 o'clock, guests began to arrive. My friend Carmela brought wine and hugged me tightly at the door. "This is beautiful, V," she whispered. "You really outdid yourself." "Let's see if anyone notices," I muttered. She gave me a look, but said nothing. People mingled, the buffet warmed, the wine flowed. The room buzzed with old friends, cousins, coworkers. I stood off to the side, watching my mother greet every guest like she was the Queen of Tennessee. My father, Wendell, stuck close to the punch table like always. That was his domain, small talk and gentle nods. At 7:30 sharp, we dimmed the lights and cued the slideshow. I walked to the mic to introduce it, heart oddly thudding, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted, just once, to be seen. But before I could say a word, our family friend Al took the mic from my hand. "Before we begin," he said, grinning, "let's all give a big round of applause to the one who made this whole night possible, Lydia." People clapped. All eyes turned to Lazarus' girlfriend, sweet, polite, and brand new to the family. She stood there frozen for a second, then smiled awkwardly. My chest thudded. I glanced toward Darlene. She was already clapping. Not one person corrected him, not even Lazarus. I stepped back from the mic, face blank, hands steady, because I'd trained myself over years to hide that flicker of humiliation. Carmela caught my eye across the room. Her brow furrowed. I shrugged, then forced a smile. The slideshow started. Old pictures, slow music, and a silence inside me that stretched like a rubber band about to snap. After the videos, there were speeches. Wendell spoke first, predictable and brief. Then Darlene took the mic, her voice lilting, warm, as she thanked everyone for coming. "You know," she said, pausing for effect, "not every child makes it easy. Some give you gray hairs before their high school diploma. Some give headaches instead of help, but we love them anyway. Even the ungrateful ones." Laughter. Real, actual laughter from people I'd known since I was in braces. Carmela's head snapped toward me, her mouth opening to say something. I just stood there. Wendell lowered his eyes. Lazarus chuckled under his breath. Darlene passed the mic to someone else and walked away like she hadn't just punched me in the chest in front of 50 people. The worst part wasn't the joke. It wasn't even the laugh. It was that no one said a word to stop it. No one said, "That's not fair." No one said, "Venitra's the one who planned all of this." I waited 5 minutes, slipped out the side door, and walked into the kitchen where the staff was washing dishes. "Need anything?" a teenage girl asked. I shook my head and leaned against the wall, letting the noise of clinking glass and faucet water fill the space where I should have cried. But nothing came. Instead, my mind reeled with moments I'd brushed off before. Times Darlene praised someone else for a meal I'd cooked. When Lazarus got the credit for gifts I paid for. When Wendell told people Lazarus helped us more than anyone, even though he was off on spring break while I was wiring money home. I stayed in that kitchen for 15 minutes, then walked back into the hall like nothing happened. I found Carmela beside the dessert table. "Did she just call you ungrateful?" she asked under her breath. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the sheet cake I'd ordered that morning, the one I'd picked up myself, double-checked the spelling 3 times. And there it was. Happy anniversary, Wendell and Darlene, spelled wrong. My name wasn't anywhere on the card taped beside it. Again, Carmela offered to drive me home after the party, but I said no. I needed silence more than company. The kind of silence where nothing interrupts your thinking, not even music or road noise. I pulled out of the parking lot with the windows up and my phone tucked face down in the passenger seat. The parking lot lights disappeared in the rearview mirror, and so did the warmth of the evening. "Did she just call you ungrateful?" Carmela's voice still rang in my ears, sharp and clear like truth rarely is. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even grip the steering wheel tighter. I just drove. And in that space, I realized something that should have hit me years ago. When enough people stay silent after someone slaps you with words, that silence becomes its own kind of answer. Sometimes, the room doesn't need to say we agree. It just needs to not say we don't. The turn onto my street felt colder than usual. I parked out front, cut the engine, and sat in the dark for a while. I didn't want to go inside, not because I was afraid of anyone. I just didn't know what version of myself they'd expect this time. The servant? The stand-in? The ghost with the paycheck? 2 years earlier, I had a life lined up. A grad program at UTK, classes scheduled, books stacked. I'd worked for it. It wasn't anyone else's dream. It was mine. But that spring, Darlene went in for surgery. Complications, they said. She needed help at home, and Lazarus had already taken on so much, according to her. No one asked me to give anything up. No one sat me down and said, "Venitra, this is on you." That's the trick of families like Meneno, one asks for sacrifice. They just expect it to appear. Quietly. Without thanks. Without paperwork. I told myself I'd defer a semester. Just one. I even kept the books. But fall came, and I stayed. Then winter. Then a year. Eventually, I stopped checking course listings. One afternoon, I overheard Darlene telling her friend at church, "It's not like Venitra was ever going to finish." She's not really a books person. She said it like she was stating the weather, not cruel, just casual. As if she hadn't watched me cry after acceptance letters. As if she hadn't once told me, "Your mind's your best asset." Weeks later, I helped organize Lazarus' birthday at a local restaurant, another event I paid for. I called ahead, worked with the manager, made sure everything was in place. I even made a slideshow again, like some kind of unpaid family archivist. When I got there early to help set up, the staff was still adjusting the tables. I double-checked the name cards. Mine was next to the restroom, 2 seats down from the swinging kitchen door. I stood there, reading it for longer than I needed to. Lazarus' girlfriend, who just started dating him that spring, was seated right next to Darlene. Again. The air smelled like bleach and steamed vegetables. It clung to my clothes for the rest of the night. No one noticed where I sat. Not a single person said, "Hey, maybe switch seats." I poured myself water, chewed through dry chicken, and laughed at the right moments. The jokes weren't funny. But I've learned people don't remember what you laughed at. They just remember that you smiled. There's a certain weight you carry when you realize you've been written out of the family narrative, but they still expect you to foot the bill. Lazarus textbooks? I covered them, said it was a graduation gift. The car repairs when Darlene's SUV broke down on I-40? I paid for the tow and the fix. Wendell thanked me by saying, "It's nice to see Lazarus stepping up," because he called AAA. The grocery bills? I had a standing auto draft every 1st and 15th, even when I was eating leftovers in the break room at work. They used my name when it was convenient. Venitra got the contractor discount, or Venitra knows someone at the pharmacy. But I wasn't in the family photos, the group chats, or the stories they told at dinner. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't even the helpful one. I was a utility. Driving home from that party, I passed the UTK campus. The main building was lit up, and a giant billboard hung across the side. Your future starts here. I slowed as I drove by, not to look at the students or the lights, just to see how it felt now, like standing outside your own house and realizing someone else lives there. I whispered, to no one in particular, "Mine ended here." The billboard disappeared in my rearview mirror, but the ache in my chest didn't. I made it home a little after 10. The house was quiet, too quiet, like everyone had agreed not to speak, just in case words might force us to acknowledge what had happened. I didn't turn on any lights, just went straight to my room, slipped off my shoes, and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I could still hear my mother's voice from earlier, bright, rehearsed, even the ungrateful ones. The next morning, I woke early to finish a few things for work. Taxes were coming up, and my accountant needed the breakdown of the mortgage payments I'd been making. I pulled up the family account, sorted the documents, and made a quick call to the mortgage office for the updated annual summary. I gave them my name. Then the line went silent for a beat. "Mom, sorry, but you're not listed on this property. We can't release those documents to you." I blinked. "That's not right. I've been making payments for over a year." "Well," the woman said, still polite, "you'd have to speak with one of the legal owners. The deed lists only two names, Wendell and Lazarus Hayes." I ended the call, heart racing in that dull, crawling way that anxiety does when you realize something's been happening behind your back. I opened the Knox County Property Records site and searched the address. There it was. The transfer had gone through 8 months ago. I stared at the screen, trying to remember if there'd been any discussion, any mention of this happening. But there hadn't. Last spring, we remodeled the kitchen. It had been a big deal. The old cabinets were falling apart, the plumbing leaked under the sink, and Darlene said it was time to finally have a home we're proud to host in. The estimate was just under $20,000. I offered to cover it, because Wendell's hours had been cut, and Lazarus was supposedly saving up to propose. "Don't put it on credit," I'd said. "I can manage it." They had smiled, almost sheepishly. Darlene had said, "You're better at money than we are, honey. Maybe you can handle the payments and keep us all on track." I'd agreed, like I always did. The paperwork? It was a blur. Some of it happened during a notary visit for something else. They said it was updating insurance beneficiaries or correcting a clerical error. I signed without reading closely. I trusted them. I shouldn't have. I sat in front of my laptop for another hour, pulling up bank statements and email threads. Every transaction labeled gift, every payment categorized under my name, but never attributed in writing to any shared agreement. I found one email from Lazarus. "Appreciate the help, sis. You're a lifesaver." No mention of repayment, nothing legal. Just a text from months ago, sent at 1:14 a.m., probably while he was drinking with his friends. I printed it anyway. I asked Wendell about it that evening. He was standing in the garage, reorganizing his tools, a ritual he did when he didn't want to make eye contact. "Why wasn't I listed on the house?" I asked. He didn't look up. "You never said you wanted to be." "Because I thought it was implied. I've been paying the mortgage. I paid for the kitchen." He finally glanced my way, blinking slowly. "We thought you just wanted to help. It didn't seem like you were expecting credit." "Credit?" I said, trying not to laugh. "It's not about credit. It's about honesty." Wendell didn't argue. He just picked up a wrench, tapped it once against the table, and said, "You always take things too personal, Venetra." That night, I started compiling everything. Screenshots, invoices, bank logs labeled by date, category, and amount. I didn't do it to win anything. I wasn't even thinking about confronting them again. I just needed a record, something real, something I could hold in my hands when the gaslighting got too thick. If they can erase me on paper, I whispered to myself, what else have they already buried? I stayed up until past midnight, printing, hole punching, filing each page carefully. I labeled the folder in bold black marker, "Documentation if they ever come for more." Then I slid it under my bed and turned off the lamp. I wasn't just saving files. I was preparing for war. The morning after I finished the folder, I sat at the edge of my bed, again some spot. Same stillness, but this time I felt heavier. Not sad, not quite angry. Just full. The kind of full that makes you want to shut down before someone tries to pour one more drop into you. I was supposed to sign the lease that afternoon. A small apartment over in Bearden. Not fancy, but it had a washer-dryer hookup and a window with decent morning light. I'd already scheduled the appointment. Already imagined which drawer would hold my spoons. I was tying my shoes when Darlene called from the hallway. Her voice cracked like static, scared. Breathless. Chest pain, she whispered. Within 20 minutes, we were at urgent care. She was pale, shaky, clutching her side. I paced the waiting room while the nurse took her in. I canceled the lease meeting from my phone, told the agent it'd reschedule soon. 2 hours later, Darlene walked out of the back room, sipping a Sprite. All fine, she said. Just a panic attack, they think. Must have been the heat. That night, I made her soup, propped her up with pillows, refilled her water without her asking. Weeks later, our neighbor Cheryl stopped by while I was watering the front steps. She chatted about her dog, the rising gas prices, and then dropped it casually. Glad your mom's doing okay. I saw her at Kroger that same afternoon. She was in urgent care. She looked just fine to me. I smiled and nodded, but my stomach dropped. She'd been home all day. It took me 2 days to admit it out loud, even to myself. She hadn't just called at a convenient time. She'd chosen that moment, and had fallen for it again. That wasn't the first time something had slipped away from me before I could hold on to it, but it was the last time I'd give up a lease for a woman who thought guilt was a valid way to keep someone close. Jorian was a different kind of leaving, more subtle. It felt like a slow dissolve instead of a snap. We'd been seeing each other for over a year. It wasn't dramatic. We met at a friend's engagement party. He laughed too loud and danced like he hadn't learned timing from anywhere but instinct. I liked that about him. I liked that he wasn't from Knoxville. By month 8, he started talking about us moving in together. He even brought brochures from a condo complex near his office. He wasn't rushing, it was more of a suggestion. An idea worth exploring. I'd smiled. Not fully committing, but not rejecting it either. Then he started pulling back. First, texts got shorter. Then he stopped calling. I gave him space, thinking he was stressed. A week later, he ended it in a message. I care about you, but you've got a lot on your plate. I don't think I fit in your world. At the time, I assumed it was just him being polite. A man's way of exiting without confrontation. But one evening, over dinner with Carmela, the truth came out. She pushed her salad around, avoiding eye contact. You know your mom called him, right? I put down my fork. She told him you were burdened, that you'd never have time to be someone's partner. Not really. That he deserved someone without all the chaos. I stared at her. She said she was just protecting you, Carmela added quickly. But Jorian took it seriously. I didn't reply. What was there to say? When I asked Darlene about it weeks later, she shrugged. He wasn't right for you anyway, too soft. Would have left the first time life got hard. She spoke like it was common sense, like sabotaging my relationship was just another responsible act of parenting. There's something chilling about realizing the people you trusted have been making decisions on your behalf, not to help, but to trap. And what was worse, they did it using your name, as if you'd approved it, as if your silence was consent. The apartment I never signed for, the man who stopped calling. They were all pieces of a narrative I never got to write. They wanted me to stay, not because they loved me that way, but because they needed the extra body, the income, the reliability. They didn't want me to leave. Not really. Not because they feared losing me, but because they feared having to replace me. And I made it easy. I kept showing up, paying, covering, smiling, filling the space without ever asking if I wanted to. But something had shifted. I stopped going downstairs for dinner. I stopped offering to pick up prescriptions. I still paid bills, still folded laundry. But I did it quietly, like an employee finishing the last 2 weeks after submitting notice. I ate alone, watched shows on my laptop with earbuds in. Some nights I parked down the block, just to get a moment of air before walking through the front door. The truth is, I'd started leaving long before I left, and not leaving physically doesn't mean you haven't already gone. One night, while sitting on my mattress floor with a bowl of plain rice, my phone buzzed. It was Carmela. "You still planning to leave?" I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "I'm not sure if I'm staying, but I know this next time, I won't warn them." I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Carmela's message hung in the air like smoke after a match had burned out. I hadn't answered right away because I wasn't sure what counted as leaving anymore. I was still here, physically, but so was a version of me I didn't recognize, one that kept giving chances to people who cashed them like checks. The next Sunday, I walked downstairs just before dinner. The timing wasn't a coincidence. I knew everyone would be in the living room. I needed them in one place. Lazarus was watching a rerun on TV. Wendell sat on the recliner, with a paper plate in his lap. Darlene was in her usual spot on the couch, flipping through her church bulletin like she might actually read it. I cleared my throat. "Can I have a few minutes?" 3 heads turned toward me, not in surprise, more like inconvenience. "I have something to show you," I said. I walked over to the TV stand, unplugged the HDMI from the cable box, and connected my laptop. On the screen appeared a paused frame. Darlene, sitting at the kitchen table 6 months ago, thanking me for covering her medical copay and for always putting the family first. I pressed play. No one interrupted. The video lasted 43 seconds. When it ended, I clicked through screenshots, bank transfers, payment receipts, a side-by-side of their mortgage statement with my routing info. Silence. Then Darlene laughed softly. "Anyone can edit a video, Venetra." I blinked. She leaned back, arms crossed. "I mean, it's sweet that you care this much, but you're making it a bigger deal than it is." Lazarus didn't say a word. His eyes didn't leave the floor. Wendell stood up, dumped his plate in the trash, and walked into the garage without a glance in my direction. No yelling, no one called me a liar, but not one of them said, "You're right." That stung more than anything. They weren't confused. They just didn't care. Not enough. I closed the laptop, slid it back into my bag. "I've been covering this house's bills for nearly 2 years. Darlene waved a hand like she was brushing off lint. "And we're grateful. But you were living here. You weren't paying rent. So the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the repairs, those don't count?" I didn't say that. But you didn't say they did either. I walked upstairs without another word. That night, after brushing my teeth, I opened the banking app on my phone to review upcoming transfers. Something looked off. The checking account jointly held between me and Darlene, set up back when I thought trust could be legal, was down to $2.43. Yesterday, it had over $4,800, and had just paid all the household bills. I sat down on my bed, opened the transaction history. Withdrawal, $4,168.75. Authorized by secondary holder. I called the bank. The man on the line was polite, almost robotic. Because the account is joint and both parties have access, the transaction is considered valid. But I didn't authorize it. I understand, Mom. But she did. That was the moment the rage stopped being theoretical. It turned solid, like something I could feel settle behind my ribcage. I texted Carmela. "They think I'll take this quietly. I won't." Then I got to work. Not with anger, not with threats, just steps. I froze the account, canceled the auto payments, changed the passwords on every digital file. I wasn't looking to hurt them, but it'd be damned if I let them rob me twice, once in money, again in silence. I called the bank the next morning and requested that the joint account be formally closed and flagged. By noon, I'd documented every transfer made in the past 18 months, organized by month and category. The stack of paperwork looked like a tax audit. At the bottom of my final note, I added a line. "This is not a threat. This is my boundary." For years, I thought loyalty meant absorbing betrayal and still showing up with casseroles. Now I knew better. This time, I wouldn't let silence be mistaken for agreement, or compliance, or guilt. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch, watching the sky bleed from orange to navy. My phone buzzed again. Carmela, are you ready for them to hate you for being right? I looked at the app again. 2:43s. I didn't even hesitate. They already do, I whispered. The next morning came quiet and gray. I was still in my robe, sipping coffee on the porch, when I glanced out the window and noticed something strange. My Carmi fully paid off, in my name, insured by me, car wasn't in the driveway. At first, I thought maybe it had been towed, or maybe Wendell had moved it to the street for yard work. But as I stepped outside and scanned the curb, my chest tightened. It was just gone. I called Lazarus. He picked up on the second ring, casual like I was asking him about the weather. Hey, yeah, I've got it, he said before I even asked. Mom said it made more sense for me to use it. You're not going anywhere, right? I mean, you live here rent-free anyway. I didn't respond. My throat burned not from sadness, but from how fast betrayal turns your stomach. I paid for that car, I said finally. I made every payment, the title's in my name. Yeah, he said slowly, but you never really drove it much. I hung up without another word. Back inside, I stared at the empty driveway through the front window. The same one I used to shovel when it snowed, even though Wendell had two good legs. The same one I'd once parked in after night classes, still in scrubs from helping at the campus clinic. By dinner, I'd made up my mind. I walked downstairs as they were setting the table. Wendell at the head, Darlene spooning mashed potatoes into her dish, like the world hadn't shifted that morning. Lazarus was already chewing, like always. I need to ask about the car, I said calmly. Darlene didn't even look up. If you're going to nickel and dime us, maybe it's time you started contributing like an adult, instead of holding your petty generosity over our heads. I let the silence stretch. You mean the mortgage I've been paying for 2 years? I asked. Lazarus rolled his eyes. Here we go again. Wendell muttered. Don't start like I was the problem, like they hadn't all just crossed another line. I didn't sign up to fund your lives, I said, still calm, and I didn't agree to be erased in the process. Darlene's voice sharpened. You came into this family acting like we owed you something. I am this family, I said. The problem is, you only remember that when a bill shows up. That was when the yelling started. Darlene stood up, eyes blazing. You've made everything harder than it needed to be. You walk around here like you're better than everyone. Like we're lucky to have you. Lazarus chimed in. You're always playing the victim, Venetra. Always. And then came the final blow sharp, loud and rehearsed, like she'd been saving it. You're ungrateful, Darlene shouted. Get out and never come back. The room went still. Even the sound from the television cut out between commercials. Wendell didn't say a word. Lazarus sat back, like he'd just watched a good scene in a bad movie. I stood there, letting the words sink. Not because I was surprised, but because the delivery was so neat, so clean. I turned, walked upstairs without slamming a single door. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I packed slowly. 2 bags essentials only. I left my books, my bedding, the small trinkets I once thought made the room mine. Downstairs again, I placed the house key on the kitchen counter, next to the mail tray where I used to tuck in extra grocery receipts. At the front door, I paused. You won't have to tell me twice, I said, my voice low but firm. The door clicked shut behind me. Outside, the sky had darkened, but the air was oddly warm. I walked past the driveway. My car was still gone. Just an empty space where my independence used to be. I sat on the front step and texted Carmela. I'm locked out of everything I paid for. A moment later, she responded. That's not a lock. It's freedom disguised as exile. The next morning, I packed up what little I'd taken with me and headed straight to Carmela's place. She opened the door in sweats and a silk bonnet, handed me a mug of lukewarm coffee, and didn't ask a single question. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But by midweek, something changed. Carmela wasn't cold, just different. Her texts were shorter. She started eating dinner in her room. She said she was busy with work, but even when we were in the same space, She was somewhere else. Distant. Careful. By Thursday, I couldn't take it anymore. "Hey," I said gently. "Is something going on?" She hesitated, then set her fork down and looked me in the eye. "Your mom messaged me." My stomach didn't drop like I expected. It just settled lower. "She said you've been unstable lately, that you're lashing out, that maybe I should take a step back, stop enabling your spiral." Her words, not mine. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not to hide, just to catch the breath that had snuck out without permission. Carmela leaned forward. "I didn't believe her, V, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't mess with my head a little." I nodded. "It's okay. I know the playbook by now. Darlene didn't fight fair. She never shouted. She whispered. She never punched. She planted. It wasn't about cutting you off. It was about making others do it for her. And it worked." I went upstairs and scrolled through my own messages. No apology, no check-in, no attempt at closure. Just silence from the same people who used to call 3 times a day when they needed help with online banking or lost their car keys. Friday morning, I opened my email and saw the subject line, "Concerned about your tone." It was from Aunt Linda, CC'd to 3 other relatives. The email was short and sharp. "We all support your parents. Please don't drag private family matters onto social media. Some of us still believe in keeping things dignified." Someone had screenshotted a quote I'd shared. Not even a rant, just a line that said, "Setting boundaries with toxic people is not cruelty. It's clarity." They turned it into a referendum. A family member I hadn't spoken to in years replied to the thread, "Hard to claim moral high ground when you're acting like a martyr online." No one stood up for me. No one asked if the quote was even about my parents. They just assumed and sided. It felt like they'd drafted a petition and sent it to my inbox. Not to check in. Not to ask what was going on. Just to vote. And I had already been tried in a court where love had long ago turned into loyalty by default. For about 10 minutes, I spiraled. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was dragging this out. Maybe all the years of help didn't entitle me to speak out now. Maybe I should have just kept it to myself. But then I walked into the kitchen, where Carmela was leaning over the sink, rinsing out her coffee mug. She turned to me and said, "You know what I realized? The only people who get defensive about boundaries are the ones who benefited from you not having any." That hit harder than anything else that week. And it clicked. This wasn't about being wrong or right. It wasn't even about fairness anymore. It was about refusing to shrink just so others could stay comfortable. I stopped checking their replies after that, logged out of social media, deleted the email thread. Then I did the real work. I changed every password, closed every joint account, scrubbed all shared documents off my cloud drive. Anything they still had access to, I took back. Next, I wrote an affidavit. It was a quiet kind of declaration, a simple, factual record of my contributions, financial, logistical, emotional. No rants, no jabs, just facts. I sent it to a lawyer Carmela recommended not to start a lawsuit, but to file it in case they tried to come after me for anything. Not out of anger, out of protection, out of peace. By Sunday night, I sat at her kitchen table with my laptop open. One final email drafted, cursor blinking at the bottom. I reread it twice before hitting send. "Do not contact me unless it is through legal counsel. I am no longer part of this system." I closed the lid. Carmela poured us both a glass of wine. She raised hers toward me like a toast. I didn't clink back. I just said what I meant. Now let's see who really needed whom. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from anxiety, but from the clarity that finally set in. It was strange how peace could keep you wide awake. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak from the ceiling fan above Carmela's living room. I stayed on the couch with a blanket wrapped around my legs, reading and rereading the email I'd just sent, as if freedom had a timestamp. By morning, I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. It was from the insurance office that handled an old family policy. The voice on the line was polite but brisk. "Ms. Hayes, This is just a courtesy confirmation. The settlement payout for claim NAR14827 was processed in full last August and used toward a home renovation. Just letting you know the account is now considered closed. My stomach tensed. I'm sorry, what payout? I asked. It was a secondary disbursement from the Family Injury Protection Plan. The co-listed name was yours, but we received signature confirmation from the other party. There was a long pause. Would you like me to email you the signature on file? I said yes. 30 minutes later, I stared at a scanned document on my screen. My name was there, but the signature wasn't mine. Not exactly. It was copied. The exact shape, the little loop on the T, the curve on the REIT, was the signature it stored in the family medical folder for emergencies. The one I gave Darlene years ago when she couldn't make it to a clinic and I needed to authorize her release papers. She'd used that signature to take the last bit of money that had both our names on it. I didn't cry, but my hands shook as I closed the laptop. The knock came that afternoon. I opened the door expecting a package, maybe a neighbor needing help. Instead, it was a courier holding a pale yellow envelope. No stamp, just my name written in rushed black ink. Inside, a handwritten letter and a printed message from Wendell. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank is talking foreclosure. Can you help? No greeting, no apology, just a demand disguised as a plea. Underneath, in shakier handwriting, Darlene had added, "We all said things we didn't mean. You know how families are. Things got heated, but that doesn't mean we stop being there for each other." I held the letter like it might catch fire in my hands. They still thought I was the safety net. Still believed it'd bend if they used just the right words. Just enough guilt. I folded the letter back into the envelope and left it on the coffee table. That evening, as Carmela stirred pasta at the stove, I sat quietly on the arm of the couch. My phone buzzed again. Wendell! I let it ring once before picking up. His voice was cautious, like someone trying not to step on thin ice while pretending they didn't know it was frozen. "Maddie," he said, using the nickname only he used. We were all upset. "You know how your mother gets. And you've always been sensitive." I didn't speak. Darlene's voice came through the receiver next, softer than usual, the tone she used with strangers at church. "We didn't mean for things to go this far, baby. You know we love you. We just got frustrated. You've always been strong. We thought you could handle it." That was the moment I cut in. "You didn't want me. You wanted what I gave you. And now that it's gone, you're scrambling." There was silence. "You took the car. You emptied the accounts. You used my name, my savings, my trust. And now you're asking for more?" Wendell sighed. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that." I ended the call. Then I opened my laptop and wrote one last message. To Darlene and Wendell. Subject: Final statement. Attached: a clean, itemized list of every dollar you'd contributed over the last 3 years. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, medical bills. Labeled by date and purpose. At the bottom, I added a single line. For your records. Since you never kept any. Then, below that, this will be the last time I ever carry something that doesn't belong to me. I hit send, closed the laptop, walked over to the window, and opened it wide. Outside, the wind had picked up. The air smelled faintly like cut grass and rain. The tree across the street, the one I'd seen bare in winter, now held tiny green leaves. "They planted nothing," I whispered, "and expected fruit." I stood there a moment longer. I'm planting elsewhere now. The breeze from the open window stayed with me all night. I didn't close it, even after the temperature dropped. Something about letting the air circulate through that apartment made it feel more like mine. I'd lived there for 3 months already, but that night was the first time it really felt like home. I didn't hear from them again. Not a call, not a text. No response to my email, and honestly, I didn't expect one. A week later, I ran into a mutual friend at the grocery store. We exchanged polite smiles over a bin of sweet potatoes. She didn't say much at first, but as I turned to leave, she cleared her throat. By the way, she said softly, your parents, they lost the house. Foreclosure went through. They're in some duplex off Millington now. She said it gently, like she expected me to crumble. But I didn't. I just nodded. Thanks, I replied. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't satisfying. It just was. I learned through bits and pieces after that Lazarus had dropped out of grad school. He was back home for a while, then moved in with someone new, taking a job coaching Little League in the next county. Darlene and Wendell kept their heads down. No lawsuits, no apologies. Just a slow retreat from the life they once held so tightly. Consequences didn't come with a loud bang. They arrived in quiet, inconvenient ways: downsizing, missed birthdays, family group chats where your name isn't mentioned. And still, not a single word from them. I moved to Nashville that summer. The new job wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I managed accounts for a nonprofit that helped seniors with estate planning. Irony wasn't lost on me, but there was something grounding about helping people put their lives in order when mine had been picked apart piece by piece. My apartment was tiny, second-floor walk-up, windows that stuck when it rained. But every item in that space was chosen by me. Not donated, not leftover, not borrowed. I thrifted furniture on weekends, painted a used dresser seafoam green. My couch had a sag in the middle, but I didn't mind. It cradled me at the end of long days. I started a small garden on the balcony. Basil, thyme, a tomato plant that nearly died twice before finally producing fruit. The first bloom wasn't perfect. The tomato had a crack down one side, but I plucked it and sliced it and ate it with salt and smiled. I've stopped calling it starting over, I told Carmela one evening. It's not over. It's just mine now. She stayed my closest anchor through it all. Never once made me feel like I had to earn my space. Never flinched, even after everything my family tried to wedge between us. Jorian emailed me 2 months after I moved. Just a line and a half. I should have asked for your truth instead of assuming theirs. I'm sorry. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. I didn't hate him. I didn't want to go back, but that message mattered more than he probably knew. Forgiveness, I'd realized, wasn't about letting someone off the hook. It was about setting the weight down and walking forward without it. Healing wasn't a destination. I hadn't reached a mountaintop or discovered some grand revelation. I still flinched when I saw family cars that looked like theirs. Still paused before opening holiday emails. Still wondered, sometimes, if it'd done too much. Or not enough. But the difference now? I didn't live inside those questions anymore. Some wounds don't scab cleanly. Some remain as quiet ridges beneath the skin, unseen by others, but known to you. And that's okay. I no longer waited to be loved the way I deserved by people who'd proven they didn't know how. And I didn't need to explain why I'd left, or why I never looked back. It was enough that I did. One morning, I sat on the floor of my apartment with a mug of coffee and my legs tucked beneath me. Sunlight spilled through the window. The air was warm again. Outside, my balcony garden had its first bloom of the season, one clean, full tomato clinging to the vine like it knew it belonged. I looked at it for a while, then whispered, "You said I was ungrateful, but I've never been more grateful to finally have myself." Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing you'll ever do. I used to think being a good daughter meant staying silent, giving more, and asking for nothing in return. But I've learned that love without respect isn't love, it's control dressed up in family ties. If you're watching this and you've ever felt erased in your own home, if you've ever been told that speaking up makes you selfish, I want you to know, your boundaries are not betrayal. Your story matters, even if they never acknowledge it. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left to protect myself. And in doing so, I found peace, not because everything is perfect now, but because it's mine, my life, my voice, my terms. What about you? Have you ever been made to feel guilty for standing up for yourself, especially by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Share your experience in the comments, or just type 1 if this story hit home. And tell me, where are you watching from today? If this video touched you, if it stirred something inside you, please hit the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're building a community, here one story at a time. And trust me, the next one might be the one that saves someone's voice.